Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to Do Good Work Podcast, hosted by Terrell Strayhorn and Jaquin Johnson. We specialize in taking a deep dive into issues that truly matter. Each episode unpacks the challenges and opportunities facing today's leaders, from classrooms to boardrooms, offering insights that inspire real change. By redefining success, we're changing lives, empowering people everywhere to create environments where everyone feels a sense of belonging, whether at home, work, or school. So hey, sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we explore the issues shaping our futures, one meaningful conversation at a time. Let's go!
Welcome. So glad to have so many folks tuning in to the show. We are coming to you live from, where are we?
St. Louis.
Columbia, Missouri. Well, we flew into St. Louis.
Okay, fair
but
enough.
Columbia, Missouri, for the tenure party of Michael Stephen Williams, who just got tenured at the University of Missouri. Hopefully he'll come into the camera in just a moment, show his face, but we're delighted to have the opportunity to come and celebrate with one of our academic friends and family. But we are most excited tonight because we have on the show the one, the only Ann Montgomery. And so I'm going to kick it over to Jaquin, who's going to start with our show and how we do our game.
Absolutely. So every show we know that for the regulars, get in the camera.
I think it's there, but okay. Yeah, you're right.
We use the first letter of our last name to describe our week or day. So Ann, you are Montgomery. You are
Yes.
M. How would you describe your week or day using the letter M?
With the letter M. It's 108 degrees where I am. I just want to take a nap. Does N count? Close to M.
And M for muggy, probably.
No, I'm in the desert.
Oh, that's right.
Sonoran Desert. We don't do mug. Well, a little bit, but rarely. It's what they call the dry heat.
We'll take it.
It's still just hot.
Yeah, hot.
So nobody wants to go anywhere. The dogs are sleeping on the tile, and people don't want to move around. You can get third-degree burns from your seatbelt in your car. So we don't go anywhere.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
It's like winter in places, where it snows and it's dark and gray and no one goes out. So it's kind of like that.
Wow.
So for me, I'm Johnson, the letter J. I have not had time to really think about it because we have been flying all over the place.
Yeah.
But because we are at a private event with one of our academic families celebrating him and his tenure, I would say jolly. This is something as a emerging scholar, someone who wants to be, on the tenure track and reach promotion. I think that this is a perfect example of success and what it takes to reach that level of success and be that prominent scholar. So I would say jolly for me. Yourself?
I am going to say I am feeling actually very seen, kind of like, it's kind of great to have one of my former doctoral students who's moved through the ranks and earned tenure promotion. And he's brought 40 people together for this. So, it's a time where you get to feel very proud of the work we get to do in higher ed. And so I would say seen is my word.
Seen. I like that word. Yeah, that's good. I think seen is really good because of the work that you do. And you get to see how the people that you mentored evolve over time.
Yes.
And then being seen that the appreciation when you come back and celebrate them.
Yeah. So we have the job corner that we do. So what we typically do is we talk a lot about the fact that people are, while we're celebrating the tenure promotion of someone, there are people who are challenged to have jobs and find jobs. So we offer a little advice about those jobs. And one, we ask our guests to share what kind of tips do you have for people who want to get into the kind of work that you've been able to do, especially in commentating about sports, authoring, but also we'll talk for ourselves about some advice we have there. So tell us a little bit about What advice would you have for someone who wants to get into sports commentating? How do you do
Okay,
it?
well, that was one of my careers. I also was a teacher for 20 years. So, but sportscasting is tough. You know, the thing that people don't understand is the most important skill is that you know how to write, that you know how to tell a story. And when I taught sportscasting or broadcast or sports reporting, my students were shocked that we write everything that we say. Unless you're doing play-by-play or color, then it's different. But when you see newscasters on a set or sportscasters, it's all scripted because everybody has to know what you're going to say, right? Everybody has to know that, oh, Anne's on camera, or bring up the highlights, or bring up the score, or bring up the soundbite. So it's all scripted, and that seemed to bother them. They thought you could just get a microphone and talk. I said, no, you've got to be able to write. You've got to be able to tell stories. And sometimes the stories are 15 seconds, sometimes they're 30, sometimes they're 2 minutes, sometimes they're longer than that. So you have to learn how to tell stories in a certain amount of time. And it's a difficult thing to learn. And of course, you have to understand sports on top of it.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. There are some people who are interested in that work and don't realize that writing is very important.
It's the number one. When I got hired at ESPN, because I anchored Sports Center a couple of years, I asked my boss why he hired me. He said, because you can write. That was the number one thing. So yeah, it's incredibly important that you know how to tell a story.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, because one of the things we often talk about with folks who are writing, especially as like social science researchers, is that we were just saying this, where were we last night? Buffalo, in Buffalo, New York, talking to folks about, you know, whether you're writing for sports or you're writing for academics, whether you're quantitative in your methodology or qualitative, you're ultimately trying to tell a story and help people understand what's the message. You know, I was giving Jaquin some shout outs last night. He did a really good job telling a story. We had like a coffee and conversation, informal huddle with some, 200-300 students. And he sort of told this story that was very personal, but, it started off, it had a attention grabber, and then he sort of coasted up to this apex of the story, and you're sitting there like, what's going to happen next? And then he coasts you through that part. And I thought, well, I mean, it was about his research motivations, but it was a very good story. And I think being able to write good stories and tell good stories is exactly what it is. You had some insights about tips for jobs this week too, right?
Yeah, most recently, our experiences teach us so much, which is why experience is a good teacher. And for me, based on what I have observed over the course of time in my career, is that one thing that, one episode I said that we have to research the role and the job, and from us it's education, so the institution. What is their mission? What is their values? Where are their goals? Where are they trying to go? But last night I had a revelation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that I have not done myself, and I want to share with you all is research the role, who's been in the role, and how long they've been in that position. Because you have to ask yourself, if we see a pattern of maybe it's a 2-year, 10-year, or whatever it is, are you okay with that time frame? If you're okay with that, then apply. But I think that some of us can get in these roles and not realize the history of who's been in those roles and how long they've been there. And then we get there, we're surprised that the average tenure is a year or so.
And honestly, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In broadcasting, that's very important because you move constantly. You move every 2 years. It's like minor league baseball. If you follow baseball at all, you start in A ball where you don't eat very well and you stay in cheap motels and you travel by bus, right?
Yes, yeah.
Then you go to AA and you make a little more money and you stay in better hotels, AAA, and then maybe someday you make the major leagues. But you move around a lot. And when I was teaching sports reporting, I told the kids, I said, don't get married, don't have children, because you're going to have to keep moving. And they seemed a little shocked by that. But I said, that's the nature of the business. I mean, can you imagine a baseball player saying, oh, I don't want to go to the major leagues, because I live over here. It's like that in journalism too. You move a lot. And you're right. You have to look into that to say, is that something I really want to do? Am I already married to someone who has tenure, or I'm very close to my family. My mother lives 3 houses down. Broadcasting and journalism, print journalism, it's not like that. You pick up and go, like, on it real fast.
Yeah.
That's so true. I mean, same for us, kind of. In my role as recruiters, we don't really stay in that role too long. I think the average time is 2 years before someone moves on. So again, ask yourself, is that okay? I think if you have a family or significant other, or whatever that kind of holds you to in that area, if it's easy to just pick up and leave, and if
It's
not,
the nature of the business I was in. I mean, you just did. You didn't turn down. I didn't say, no, ESPN, I don't want to come because, I live in Phoenix and you're in Connecticut. I mean, you don't do that.
What about you? Any job tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think from this week, one particular sort of insight is, and it seems like it's not really a job tip, but it is. I think that, I've met a lot of people, especially in the past week, who are looking, they're aware that people are hiring and they want to know what people are hiring for and what are the qualifications and what is the position and what's the salary. And that's really, really important. But the other part of this is, what do you want to do? Like, what are you looking to be able to get from this position? How does it connect with your why? How does it connect with your overall career? And I think sometimes, I mean, I get it. You need a job, you need to make money so that you can pay bills. So a lot of times it's employer focused. But to anyone who's listening, watching in the live stream, watching the recording later, listening to the podcast, I think also having that introspection to think about, like, what do I want right now? People often ask, like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? What do you need right now? And that's a good question for me sometimes, like, because you'll hear about this new opportunity, or you'll see this announcement and you'll say, oh, I want to apply for that. But if you really ask yourself, what do you want to do that you're not able to do right now? Right. So before you apply, because we were having this conversation with a colleague who, saw a fancy job out there they wanted to apply to. It made more money, but through our conversation with them, we realized they have flexibility in their job. They know their supervisor, and their supervisor likes them. They have to take care of some loved ones. And so in this current job, they're able to sort of go to doctor's appointments and come back and come and go. I mean, that's meaningful. And so, yes, this other job might give you 5,000 more, 10,000 more, but you don't know who you're going to work for. You don't know if you'll have that flexibility. You don't know if you can come and go as you need. So sometimes it's really asking yourself, what do I need? And then matching it to a job versus finding the job and then trying to match yourself to it. That's my opinion.
Perhaps as educators, you've run into students who it's all about money. It's like, no, I'm going to make all this money. I said, but that isn't going to necessarily make you happy. It's nice to have money, and it's nice to be able to pay your bills and not live paycheck to paycheck. But honestly, if you go to work every day and it's drudgery and you hate going, your life sucks. So quite honestly, I think as educators, we have to say exactly what you did. Does this fit your lifestyle? Does this fit where you see yourself? Because sometimes, especially young people, look at careers and go, I want that thing. But boy, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of sacrifice. And you have to be willing to give up certain things to get that. So you have to decide if that works for you.
Well, so thank you, Rhonda, and others who are writing in the chats across platforms. Listen, you're probably so excited thinking this conversation has already kicked off with a great start. Let's introduce who you're listening to. We have the fortunate pleasure of having on our show today Ann Butler Montgomery. Ann Montgomery has worked as a television sportscaster, newspaper and magazine writer, teacher, author, and amateur sports official. She's worked for 5 TV stations, including, write this down, everyone, ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut, where she anchored the Emmy and ACE, the ACE award-winning Sports Center. She finished her on-camera broadcasting career with a 2-year stint as the studio host for NBA's Phoenix Suns. I know we got some Phoenix Suns fans out there, right? Montgomery was a freelance writer as well as a sports or staff reporter for 6 publications, writing sports and features, movie reviews, and archaeological pieces. Her novels, including Your Forgotten Sons, we'll put it in the chat in just a moment, The Castle, A Light in the Desert, Wild Horses on the Salt, The Scent of Rain, and Wolfcatcher, have just won so many awards and so much attention from people. They're good reads. You got to get them. Montgomery taught journalism and communication skills in a Title I high school. We're going to talk about it for 20 years, and was an amateur sports official for over 4 decades, a time during which she called baseball, ice hockey, soccer, basketball games, and served as a high school football referee in her free time, and a crew chief. Montgomery is a foster mom to 3 sons and a daughter, and when she can, she indulges in her passions. What are they? Rock collecting, scuba diving, and playing the guitar. She splits her time between Phoenix, Arizona, where she is right now, and St. Croix, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Put your hands together and welcome to the show. And we're so glad to have you on the
Thank
show.
you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we kick off with this. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Well, it's a rather, I guess, unique journey in that I'm 70 years old. And when I wanted to be a sportscaster, I was 17. And that was the 70s, do the math. And there just weren't women sportscasters back then. There weren't. And when my mother came to me and said, so where do you want to go to college? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, a sportscaster. And she said, don't be ridiculous. I'm trying to have a serious conversation with you. And everywhere I went to college, I went to Miami of Ohio, and they said, you can't be a sportscaster, you're a girl. I got out of college with my degree in communications, couldn't get a job, couldn't get an interview. They just laughed at me. And I ended up working in a bar in Georgetown in Washington, D.C., which was great fun. It was the 80s. And yes, it was fun. My parents had an intervention with me, by the way. They came down and said, we put you through college so you could be a waitress. I'm like, no, Mom, I have a plan. And the plan happened like this. I went to an ice hockey game. I grew up, I was an ice skater, and I went to see the Washington Capitals play. And in the group I was with, there was a gentleman who was an ice hockey official, meaning he did kids hockey. And he was bemoaning the fact that there weren't enough officials, just like today, there aren't enough officials. And my aunt was with me. She goes, oh, Annie skates, she could be a referee. And I went, sure. And like I took the test, I went through the classes, and 6 o'clock in the morning, I found myself on the ice with 6-year-olds. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen little kids play hockey. You know, their helmets are all too big and their jerseys are down to their ankles. And I was a figure skater, ice dancer growing up, so I'd never been on hockey skates. And I went to take my first face off and I fell. And I couldn't get up because there's no toe picks on hockey skates. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I fell twice, and I've got 6-year-olds staring down at me like, what's wrong with the ref? I don't remember any more about that game, but I do recall the ride home. I had an epiphany, and I realized I didn't know enough about sports. I grew up before Title IX. You know, today I'd play hockey and not be an ice dancer because I wasn't very good, but I didn't have that opportunity. So I decided to take 5 years and become a certified sports official in football, baseball, ice hockey, soccer, and basketball. And I believe some forward-thinking news director would hire me. And that's what happened. And I ended up, as you said, working for 5 TV stations, including ESPN. The problem with all that is that when I was pushing 40, I was no longer considered pretty enough to be on camera. And I couldn't get a job anywhere in the country. And so I did a whole lot of feeling sorry for me. Poor me, right? No one wants me on TV. Now, I was depressed. I really was, because that's what I wanted to be. And no one would hire me anymore because the target audience in sports is 18 to 35, 40-year-old males. And once you're 35, you're not hot enough anymore. And for a woman, that's hard to deal with. So I found myself going from Sports Center to umpiring Little League and high school football. And I didn't want anybody to recognize me or know who I was because I was embarrassed. I was like, I didn't want anybody to say, so what are you doing now? I'm calling Little League because no one will hire me to do anything else. In fact, I was in a grocery store one night and a gentleman walked up to me and he looks at me and he's looking at me different ways and he goes, didn't you used to be somebody? And I was horrified. So few years of that, and people kept saying, you've worked around kids your whole life. You should be a teacher. I'm like, I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be a sportscaster. And they said, no. And at 42, I went back to college, got my teaching cert, ended up getting my master's degree, and I ended up teaching in a Title I school, which is where 75% of the kids live in poverty. I'm a middle-class kid. Both my parents went to college. You know, I didn't realize what I grew up with, that I grew up with everything you really needed. Because, you know, the kids in my school we had 400 kids in foster care. We had gangs, we had drugs, we had abuse, neglect. And it took me a while. I mean, when I went in, here I come from TV, you know, and I'm hard ass with the kids. And my first year, I'm teaching a newscast class, and the kids had really screwed up badly, and I was giving them a really hard time. This little girl stood up and she goes, "We don't like you." And I went, I froze. And she said, "And we don't need you." And every kid in that class walked out and left me alone in front of that class. And I don't cry very much, but I cried in front of that class because I didn't know what I did wrong. I was holding them accountable. I wanted them to be punctual. I wanted them to get their work done on time. And another teacher came up to me. She said, "Have you ever considered being nicer?" I'm like, "What do you mean nicer?" I said, "There's no nice in a newsroom. There's no nice on a football field." And I really didn't get it until one day I had this kid who was late every single day. I dragged him out of the classroom, read him the riot act, and he's 14. He's looking at his shoes. He goes, "Miss Montgomery, I'm so sorry." He said, I slept on my uncle's couch last night, and I didn't understand the bus system, and I don't know where I'm sleeping every night. It's very confusing. And I went, I'm talking to a 14-year-old homeless child. And that's when the light bulb went, ah, and I had to become nicer. And I did. But so anyway, this was not the path I thought I was going to be on. I thought I'd teach for 2 years, and then the people in TV would come to their senses and put me back on television. And I realized all the stuff I thought was important was not important at all. And I ended up teaching in that school for 20 years.
I mean, we could end the show
Wow.
now. You have
It's a bit of a long story.
no, it's a beautiful story because you touch on so many real issues, and that's what we sort of challenge ourselves with this podcast. Is we strive to identify people like yourself who have done good work, and then we bring them on the podcast to both highlight that good work and to level people's ideas about what does it take to do this. Like, there are so many people who will be inspired by just the 7 minutes you just shared, right? But we also
sorry.
no, I don't know, it's 5 minutes. It wasn't long enough is the point, right?
Okay.
Because we want to keep hearing it. But the other part of why we do this is because, and we say it, you're going to hear it at the end of the show, right? Doing good work is not without some bad moments, right?
Oh, yes.
Doing good work isn't easy. And your vulnerability is really appreciated because there are so many. We were, again, in Buffalo last night. We met so many young women. These are undergraduate researchers who, are thinking about going to graduate school, who are thinking about moving in. We had one who was talking about moving into anthropology, but as a woman. And she was talking about, like, how do I fit into this field? And, how do I preserve who I am and my identity? But I really want to be a part of this very masculine field. And she already feels shut out. And so to name it in the way that you just did, and then to offer hope and inspiration that, one, you can find other paths in, but then ultimately good work pays off. When you're good at what you do, as you are, it has crafted the bio that we just read, right? But everything wasn't glamorous.
Oh gosh, no. TV is not glamorous either.
Yeah.
But I have to say, life doesn't go the way you plan. There's always going to be these twists and turns, and they're scary. But in the end, I'm glad they fired me from TV, or I couldn't get a job. My partner, he always says, they didn't renew your contract. I'm like, I was fired. Come on. And but life takes you on different journeys you don't expect. And for me, It was my kids had very difficult situations, my students, and I had them year after year because I taught newspaper, and so I would tab them for 3 or 4 years sometimes, and I worried about them. And so in the summertime, summer approaching, I was worried about that 10 weeks. Some of them had no food. We sent food home with them, and so we were a safe place. The school was a safe place. And when you close the schools down for the summer, now you don't have a safe place. So I worried about them. And I would put my phone number on the board. They told you never to do that, but I did. I said, if you get in trouble and you don't know what to do, you call me and I'll try to help. And this one summer, 15 years ago, this young man called me, and I didn't know him very well. I only had him for one semester. And he just wanted to chat. And I'm like, Brandon, is everything okay? He goes, yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I said, look, I put you in the newspaper class next year. I'm going to see you when school starts. He said, great. And when school started, he didn't show up. And then his phone was disconnected. And I'm like, I was worried about him. And a couple of weeks into the school year, he calls and he said, Miss Montgomery, I'm hungry. I said, what are you talking about? You're hungry. He said, well, I'm in foster care now. And they lock up the food in the morning. And the school I go to now, they didn't get my paperwork, so they won't feed me lunch. And okay, I can swear like a sailor. And I'm lucky there were no kids in my classroom. I said, Brandon, give me your number and I'm going to call you back. And I'm swearing a storm in my classroom. And the teacher who told me to be nicer walks in. She goes, what is the matter? And I said, I explained. And she goes, oh, well, if it bothers you so much, why don't you call foster care and say he can come and live with you? And I said, don't be ridiculous. I'm 55 years old. I've never been a mother. And in fact, I couldn't have children of my own, which I struggled with for like 10 years. And then I gave up on that. I said, I'm not a mother. I've never been a mother. And she said, well, then stop complaining. 2 weeks later, that child was dropped on my doorstep. And as you read, I have 4 foster kids. There's actually been a few more that have floated through. They're all in their 20s now. I'm very proud of them. They call me mom. I'm a grandma. I have a 7-year-old grandson now from my oldest, Brandon. And I never in a million years would have ever thought I was a mother. And that getting fired from TV, becoming a teacher, and then I became a mom. I mean, life is very strange, but I wouldn't change anything for the world, even those couple of years that I felt sorry for myself. I'm so glad they've got rid of me in TV.
I think, it's just a really beautiful story. And I appreciate you sharing with us, pulling back the curtain to share exactly the life that you've lived and the good life that you live. We also believe that you're doing good work. So with that being said, like good work that's making an impact. So tell us more about the good work you're doing currently.
Well, as I said, I'm 70, so mostly I'm retired. I don't know if I qualify. I mean, I'm still a mom. I still, as any mother will tell you, it doesn't matter how old you get, you're still our kids, right? So even though my kids, Brandon just turned 30, so he's still my kid. But mostly I'm an author now. I started writing books. Ironically, I don't write about sports at all. Most of my books are about societal issues. Children in religious cults, domestic violence, rape. And a lot of these are things I confronted with my students. I ran a support group for kids, and the things that we talked about would break your heart. And my books ended up being subject matter that I gleaned from people's, societal issues.
Well, of course, you're talking to 2 folks who love to write. So we're going to call writing and authoring books very good work.
Okay.
And, telling the story. So before I move us to some other questions, we won't talk your ear off all night, but tell us a little bit about your books. So you said you don't write about sports. What kinds of themes do you find yourself addressing most in your books? And what's the inspiration for them?
I'm a news junkie, which is hard to be in this day and age. But I read the newspaper every day. I watch the news, and I glean, and have for 30 years. I run into articles that interest me, and I'm very happy that I have endless curiosity. And as a reporter, that was an important thing. And I would find subject. When I first moved to Arizona, I found out there was a religious cult here where men married like 30 wives, and some of them were teenage girls, young girls. It's still here. The prophet has been imprisoned, but I was so shocked when I read that. I'm from the East Coast, and when I came out, I said, how can this be in this day and age? And I drove up there, and I pretended I didn't know who they were. All the women wore like prairie dresses, and they have no radios, no TV, no newspaper, no magazines, nothing, no internet. And it was horrifying. And I wrote that, and it was about a young girl growing up in the cult, and it was about a young boy running away from foster care. And so that book is dedicated to my 3 sons, who all came from foster care. So and then sometimes my most recent book, Your Forgotten Sons, was a total departure for me. I had a friend who was facing a horrifying surgery that was maybe going to leave her paralyzed from the waist down. And she had a tumor wrapped around her spinal cord. And she asked me to go to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore and be her healthcare power of attorney. And the night before, she hands me this packet of 75-year-old letters from her Uncle Bud, who never came home from World War II. And he was in the Graves Registration Service. Do you know what that is? Those are the guys who locate, identify, and bury the dead. So if you see the pictures of Normandy, the beach, there's a beautiful cemetery. They built it after they recovered all the dead. They have the highest suicide rate of any military people. It's called mortuary affairs today, but in Bud's time, World War II, it was Graves Registration. So she asked me to write his story, and I did. Luckily, I'm a World War II freak, so I had a lot of background in that. But yeah, so she wanted me to tell his story, and I did. So I've written a couple of historical fictions. I have another one that I was hired by a magazine to find out who this man was. He was buried outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, 900 years ago. His tomb had 600 magnificent funerary objects, weapons and minerals and crystals and jewelry and beadwork and all this stuff. And the Hopi workers who were there in 1939 when they dug him up said, he's a magician. I was hired to find out who this man was because they drew pictures of him and everything. He didn't look like any of the Native Americans. He looked sort of Caucasian. Now, how the hell is that possible 900 years ago? So I, being not very well versed in the West and Native Americans, I plowed right in and offended people. So the story is about who he might have been, but it also goes back 900 years to what life was like here during his time. So I like anything that interests me. And sadly, people say, you should write sports books. I'm like, I don't want to. My sports were my life for 40 years. I don't care anymore. Thank you.
That is good work. When you're writing the histories and telling the stories, we're actually going to go to a conference later, I think next year, where it's all about unforgetting those histories. But listen, Ann, thank all of the folks listening and tuning in. Now you know why we had to have Ann Montgomery on the show. Thank you so much for the incredible work that you do and have continued to do. And, you know, I heard you earlier when you were answering to Quinn, you said, well, now I'm retired, which is actually the best work. That's the best work, right?
I'm still a writer though. And I'm like you guys, I blog and I write an article every week. I'm a reporter forever. And when I got out of sports reporting, I wrote features, and best job ever. I was a movie reviewer. I'm like, are you kidding? You're going to pay me to go to the movies and give my opinion? That was the best job ever. But yeah, I still write every week.
You have secured your spot on the show in the future again. But listen, if you found something that Ann shared today useful, run to Spotify, Do Good Work Podcast, or go over to our social media at Do Good Work on all things social media. Check out Ann's bio. Purchase all her books, sit back, read them. You can contact her website. And again, thank you so much on behalf of Jaquin and I and all of our Do Good Work family. Continue to do good work. And to each and every one of you who are tuning in, we will look and see you at the next episode. Listen, if you're going to do something good. And you know what we call it? Do good work.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Do Good Work Podcast. We hope you found today's conversation informative, uplifting, and insightful. Don't forget to like and share this episode with your networks. Follow us on social media at Do Good Work on X, formerly Twitter, for real-time updates, behind-the-scenes content, and so much more. Until next time, friends, don't be afraid to do something, but do something good. Do good work.